There were clues about it in some of the videos in my channel. It could have been a sophisticated mystery hidden behind my game development tutorials, but I hope you all were able to solve it. I love Default. There are multiple reasons for this, so if the mystery is finally solved, let's summarize what was added to this list in 2022. Looking at the frequent but small releases of Default, we might not be hyped for the introduced features, but step by step the Default team introduced in 2022 a lot of very useful features, and some of them are definitely worth highlighting. Among 12 releases, one each month, there were 2 special, a little bit more revolutionary releases in 2022, setting new ways for Default that increased minor version count to 1.3 and 1.4 respectively. What I like the most is while adding more and more features, Default still was taking care about size and performance of the engine, and in several releases it was even shrunk down by improving implementation or cutting off parts of the core engine and moving those to extensions, like it happened for example to Spine since 1.3.0, because to be honest, not all games use 2D skeletal animations, so it is totally okay that it is now in an official extension rather than in the core. Size was also decreased for the editor itself and the generated games, for example thanks to reduced Lua bytecode depending on 32 or 60-bit architectures. In Default 1.3.1, additional separate timestep for physics simulation was introduced. Since then, the script included an additional update function called Fixed Update, which was triggered regardless of the duration of frame rendering, with a constant rate, so it is perfect for handling seamlessly physics collisions. For better physics handling, we can now also change masks and groups for each collision object at runtime. But the most breathtaking features, in my opinion, were added for rendering and 3D support. This 1.3.1 release also introduced a long-awaited frustum culling, at first for all sprite components, which allowed to save a lot of GPU bandwidth. It also introduced floating point render targets for devices that support it. The 1.3.5 release introduced another useful support, multiple render targets. Many graphical effects like for lighting, deferred rendering, SSAO, or temporal anti-aliasing operate on several components of a frame, such as position, normals, and albedo color. These are usually generated by drawing the scene once into several render targets that can be used in other parts of the rendering pipeline. Possibilities for custom shaders were also enhanced with a support for matrices as user constant type, support for anisotropic filtering, and the possibility to create textures at runtime. Default 1.3.7 added also a support for commonly used GLTF format for 3D objects and animations. It now supports skinning and animating meshes, multiple meshes per model, but still one material for all meshes or only word space vertices for skinned models, so there is still a space for improvements. What's worth noting is that the Default team is now working also on a very interesting physics-based rendering pipeline for Default, so excitement for 3D projects in Default is constantly increasing. Editor was also polished and improved last year. From what you could notice at first glance, the old Game.project view with all properties in one scrollable sheet was replaced with a new revamped form with very nice separated tabs. Default added new properties for GUI nodes for initial setup and visibility, and for sprite components and exposed scaling possibility. Additionally, a Slice 9 feature is now not only for GUI nodes, but also for the sprites. The Default API is being enhanced all the time, and in 2022 we have a possibility for some small but useful features, like to manually trigger timers, to get sprite animations, or rotate tile maps. There are still some features on the list for tile maps improvements though, but you can still use external tools for advanced map making. And thanks to the Made with Default Jam 2022, Bjorn updated his tiled software to better support default exports, and now tile maps from tiled could be seamlessly added. Next releases added possibility to set screen space position in GUI and translate position from screen to local space. We can now also cancel all animations at once, have an option to instantly remove emitted particles, to set new properties for GUI node state and visibility from script, get a list of resources for a collection proxy, and control mouse lock state, especially useful for FPSs, or setting and creating textures. There was also one maybe neglected feature, but default now detects Lua require calls in builds, which conveniently allows it to avoid runtime issues, and the serialization for Lua tables was also increased. Default continues to be one of the best engines out there for mobile game development, and with each release was keeping the engine up to date with the newest versions of the operating systems, not only iOS and Android, but desktops and consoles too. Additionally, there was added a possibility to bundle to both AAB and APK formats for Android, and all extensions are also automatically signed when bundling. There is also a new profile based on Remotery and a new build report with conveniently added build times to show you how fast default really is here. It might be also more visible because default improved Lua scripting processing a lot. Default fixed and improved a lot for gamepads handling, especially for HTML5 builds and the Steam Deck controller. Default allows tremendous enhancements with native extensions, and there are many free, official and community extensions for Default already. In 2022, Default's community released over 20 free and open source extensions, and about them I will make a separate video. But 2022 also brought up a lot of improvements for native extensions development and a lot of smaller useful features and additional functions to the API. Default is being continually improved. The amount of bug fixes and especially fixes for ANRs is astonishing for such a small team, and I would like to thank the Default for their heart put into the development of new features, documentation, examples, and maintaining one of the most reliable engines out there. Thank you. Those are not only things that are regarding Default in 2022. In November, the Default Foundation changed rules for the console's support and are no longer charging for anything for access to Nintendo Switch build tools, so you can release a game on consoles for free, as many already did in the Default community. Moreover, Default is actively working on support for Sony PlayStation consoles, so stay tuned for 2023. There was also a second game jam organized, the Made with Default Jam 2022, with 12 entries, which is pretty nice for our small community, and some awesome games released, of which every title received an award. At that time I started promoting Default a lot on social media and made a series of tweets about it, so those who followed me then might have fist pumped with my posts. And finally, in 2022 I started this YouTube channel, which I hope, with your help, will evolve into a nice place to talk and discuss game development.
You're still here. It's over.